which is an acronym for Leaders Investing for Equality,
Yes, sir.
and also the Detroit Youth Report, and he is also the Chief Financial Operating Officer, the CFO, for, is it for both, or is for the Detroit Life Coalition?
For both.
And I also know you as a businessman in Detroit for many, many years, a father, a family man, a community activist,
Yes, sir.
a brother that's been committed to our community, committed to family. I had the opportunity, I think, to teach at least
I was waiting for it. Yeah,
two
yeah.
of your children.
Oh, yep, 2 of them.
And of course, they were very proud students. I'm sure, which is a reflection of you and your wife.
I would like to
both.
think so.
And I'm always a fan and an admirer of people that are committed to family. So what we're going to talk about today is the Freedom Schools. And I'll say a little bit, and then I'll just kind of let you kind of get us into what's happening. We have what's been established in Detroit is the Detroit Independent Freedom School Movement. And this is a pickup or a takeoff of the earlier freedom schools, if I'm correct, from the 1960s and 50s. The original freedom schools were established by civil rights workers and members of SNCC, and the freedom schools back in the day, as the younger people say, were temporary alternative free schools for African Americans, mostly in the South. They were originally part of a nationwide effort during the civil rights movement to organize African Americans to achieve social, political, economic equality in the United States. And these schools were operated by young college students, people like Stokely Carmichael, Gloria Anab House, and many others. And what they did is went into places like Mississippi and other places like that to augment the education that our children were being afforded at that time. And they have very strong cultural and academic focus. And in the climate that we have in Detroit, where we have a bunch of talking heads, administrative talking heads and politicians making all kind of decisions that appear to have our children at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of whose interests they're advocating for. So in that spirit, a group of people have come together to form the Detroit Independent Freedom School Movement. Sisters like Helen Moore, who is another person who has been committed to the education of African American in Detroit for at least 50 years.
At least.
I did research on African-centered education in Detroit, which had forced me to have to look at education in Detroit for as far back as the 1960s. And Helen Moore's name was throughout the literature. So she's been on the front line ever since before. The Freedom Schools meet, if I'm not mistaken, on Saturday. They're open to the public. And with that being said, could you maybe fill in the blanks for us as it pertains to the Detroit Freedom School, Independent Freedom School Movement?
Well, I think you laid it out.
Okay.
But first, I have to, when you talk about Mama Moore and Mama Anab, we got to give credit because both of them been in this work for the longest, and it's an honor just working with them. But to set the context, when we talk about the Detroit Independent Freedom School, we got to say the why. And Baba Kafense, you laid it out that.
You say the why, as in why this is being done.
Oh, most definitely. When
Okay,
you say continuation, please.
Let me just interject one
Yes.
point. When I first talked to Mama and Neb,
Mhm.
I said, look, I was in a meeting because I'll be teaching one of the classes. I said, we need to get you in the studio so you can talk about the school because I don't think people know. What do you think she said? She said, well, look, Kafense, I would rather have one of the young people come in. And that, to me, is a sign of effective leadership. This sister's been around for a long time, but she also knows and understands that in the meeting I was in, she had a bunch of young people around her that were eager to take on this challenge. But go ahead.
No, and we was at a meeting tonight, and she's just such a quiet warrior.
She is.
And know what she's doing. But what I want to say, when you talk about the Freedom School movement and the experience she bring in building this, we want to put it in context because a lot of people don't think it's needed.
Right.
And we've made, in my opinion, we made that mistake. And so I brought you a couple of things for your viewers and for you, and if they need a copy of it, they can get it. But one thing we wanted to make clear, the stuff that's going on in Detroit is going on nationwide.
Yes.
And we bought a book for the Bible. It's called Death by a Thousand Cuts. and this is for you, and if your readers want it, I email it to you. You can
Okay.
get it out to
Let's just hold it up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can continue to talk about it. so
Death
we
by
can see.
Thousand Cuts. And this is a book that was put together by a national organization called the Journey for Justice Alliance. And Mama Moore, Keep the Vote No Takeover, and the Detroit Life Coalition, we're the local representatives for the National Journey for Justice Alliance. This book here, and the title, is what it says, Racism, School Closure.
Racism, school closures, and public school sabotage.
Is key. For all the viewers, you want to go download that book because it highlights the nationwide crime that's going on in black and brown districts throughout this nation. And so this book was done a couple years ago, which really set the fertile ground for the Detroit Independent Schools.
Okay.
It was, so
Okay.
that's the crux.
So now this is available online?
Yes,
It
you
can be downloaded?
download
Tell us
it.
the
PDF.
website. Okay.
You can go to Journey for Justice Alliance. Again, the numeral 4, Alliance.com. And if you go to the media screen, you can download it. Or if you just type in Death by Thousand Cuts and PDF after it, it should come up. But I'm only saying get that because it puts this the crime that's going on in education in context nationwide, so you can relate it to Detroit. And when you look at Detroit, I'm quite sure you probably had folks speaking here on Detroit. I won't say downfall, but the takeover started in 1999.
Yes.
And from 1999 forward, we've had event after event. So when you talk about the Freedom School is a natural outgrowth of what's happening. So when you look at the 60s, as a matter of fact, at the Freedom School this past weekend, this was the second week, but the opening class, and it was about 6 to 10 kids, youth that showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And the video that was showed to set the tone, it was a video, and you can go to YouTube and see it. It's called The Children's March.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting that in that video, it was so elaborate where they had where Dr. King came and spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And when, a lot of our folks was getting hit upside the head, we
Right.
know that history.
Mm-hmm.
And when Dr. King asked for more folks to come out, a lot of the parents said, no.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to get arrested no more. And who stood up was the kids.
Right.
And so Dr. King said, well, no, let's step back. But what happened was the youth decided to go forward.
Right.
And they planned this big march. So if you want to see that, you just go to YouTube and type in the Children's March. I put that in context again because, again, this is an outgrowth.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about when Mama and Neb said turn it over to the young folk,
Right.
this is a perfect example.
Right.
So I want to clear up something else before we go further. There's also a misnomer in the community, for whatever reason, that we're doing the Detroit Independent School to start our own charter schools.
Right.
That is not our interest. The independent school is started for two reasons, or this movement is started for two reasons. One, to provide the supplemental education academic support that our youth need, especially in this climate. Then the second part is to support or to restore public education, because as taxpayers, because taxes come out your check, right?
Yes, of
Yeah.
course they do. You know that.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And also, when we go buy stuff in the stores, we pay that 6%.
Of course.
So as taxpayers, it's our responsibility, and we're due a equitable public education system.
Exactly.
So the movement is to deal with those two things. So we want to be clear on that. So as folks out there saying we want to start our own charter school, that's not our interest.
And this is very much, for me, an example of black folks exercising Kujichagulia,
That's
which is
right.
the second principle of the Nguzo Saba self-determination.
Correct.
And we know, like you said, the Detroit public schools, in some form, shape, or fashion, have been under the rule of the state since 1999. And it's interesting because you can read newspaper reports, you can watch news stories where they say, oh, Detroit is in this bad shape, in that bad shape. But interestingly, it seems to have gotten in bad shape under the leadership of the state.
Correct.
So how can you blame the current school board that's there.
You can't.
Now, and I want to be clear, because part of the effort for coming in to talk about this is we want people to bring your children into the schools. I mean, to this school.
Correct.
Even if they're in school. Now, tell us a little bit about the subjects. The classes meet Saturday mornings.
Saturday morning from 9 to 12 at the African American Museum.
Yes.
And that's one of the sites that's opening. Another site is getting ready to open, I want to say October the 15th, or about the second week in October. That's the Shrine of the Black Madonna on Linwood.
And that's at 7625 Linwood, approximately 3 blocks from West Grand Boulevard.
Correct. And it's a couple other organizations, but those are the two that's in the hopper. But
Okay.
the African American Museum, this is actually, we just had the second week. We're
Yes.
going on the third week.
Okay.
Some of the subjects, of course, math, English, reading, all of that, but also other support that your child would need. So please, if you're interested, it's on the website of
Right.
the African American Museum. You want to go?
It's on the Charles H. Wright
Oh, yes.
website.
Right. They got it up, so you can go there. Because matter of fact, we had our meeting today about the Detroit Independent Freedom School, and a few extra people showed up
Okay.
because
and
they heard about
I'm sure, and hopefully this will grow. I know that I've referred people. If you want more information, you can reach out to the Freedom School organizers at 313-583-9395. You can email us at capital letters DIFS313 Could you give us, now the website is a different website for this book. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, the website for the book Death by a Thousand Cuts, which is give you the national view what's going on in public education. You go to J for J Alliance. Again, J for J Alliance, and it's the numeral 4. Or you can just go and type in Death by a Thousand Cuts and put in PDF, and then it'll come up.
It'll take you right to
It'll take you right to the document. You download it. And again, I mention it because it outlined it. Myself and a couple of our group from the Detroit Life Coalition, and including Mama Moore, Keep the Vote, No Takeover, we travel across the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is the same thing that's going on, the same
All
playbook
over the country, along with the gentrification and all of that. And it's essentially white America, entities in white America, corporate America, saying, look, we put things back the way we want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
You all have gained too much, so to speak.
Correct.
A lot of the sentiment that's driving the Donald Trump campaign is that America is changing in terms of complexion. And you have a lot of the status quo white middle class people that have lost a lot of things. A matter of fact, when Obama came in office, I attribute part of his success to the failure of George Bush
Correct.
to sustain the white middle class. And when they began to lose their houses, lose their pensions, and lose their investments, it was a rude awakening for them. And a lot of the realities they were facing had been a reality in the black community for years.
Mm-hmm.
So now Donald Trump is driving this whole thing that the reason that things are not like they used to be is because of black people
Correct.
and Muslims and gays and a whole list of things. And the reality is that the United States is no longer, or will soon no longer be, the predominantly white country.
Correct.
You follow what I'm saying? But let's get back to some of the subjects. I know there's a two-pronged focus of the schools. There's the academic,
Correct.
and there's also cultural.
Correct.
So we have the math tutoring, we have the science tutoring, we have a very strong poet, writer, college professor, Aurora Harris,
Mhm.
teaching writing.
You a teacher too, right? You there?
Well,
You
yeah,
gotta
I
say
am.
yourself. You
Yeah.
there?
I'll be there. Will be doing African drumming.
Mhm.
We have the Sister Ayi from Al Noor, which will be doing African dance.
Correct.
We have what's my brother's name? He's a doctor, Ezekiel Brown, I think his name is. But he's a general practitioner, a general family doctor. He and his wife will be doing some science classes.
Correct.
Then we have, I don't know if it's Piper or Sister
Piper.
Lottie Spady is doing a thing on herbology and the relationship to different herbs and things like that to the community. So it's a very diverse curriculum, and it has a science component.
Correct. Every Saturday
Yes.
every Saturday up until December, I believe, 17th. So please come out and join us. That's one aspect. The second aspect of it is it's an African-centered philosophy.
Yes. And I was going to say
Mhm.
the school or the movement draws from the African-centered
Correct.
school movement and the traditional academic piece. So
Correct.
you have a combined focus, and in fact, several other people that are involved. Mama Aneb, who has been a key organizer behind this, she's been the co-founder. A lot of people don't know that she's one of the co-founders of Aisha Shule,
Mm-hmm.
which was Michigan's first independent African-centered schools.
Mm-hmm.
She also was the director of Timbuktu.
Oh, but that's where I
Academy.
met her. Yep.
And
Mhm.
not only did she serve as the director, but she helped to write the curriculum
Mhm.
as well. And one thing, and we still have a little more time left, and I'd like to encourage those of you in the listening audience, you're listening to TV 33 WHPR, Black in the Day in the 313, an Afrocentric perspective of African and African American phenomena in history on the Get Up Stand Up show with Minister Malik Shabazz. We ask that you call in with your questions or comments. It could be a question or comment about the school. We ask you to bring your children out, bring your grandchildren out, your nieces or nephews. What we didn't say, no tuition.
Correct.
It's
All free. And that's the key. When we talk about a movement, you can't say movement without having the community involved.
Exactly.
So we're out there providing our time at no charge, because after all of this criminal activity on our public education system has happened, we decided that this is what we need to do anyway. So
Yes.
this is critical to our development. But again, I want to say the school is to provide supplemental education and support to our young people.
Yes, and many of the African-centered schools, including Aisha Shule, started out as supplemental schools.
Right.
They were Saturday schools where they felt like, okay, it's not enough history in what my child is getting in the school that I send them to every day.
Correct.
The academics are questionable. Even before there was any African-centered schools in Detroit, there were protests going back to the Northern Walkout in 1966, where 2,000 students walked out of school and stayed out of school for several days. And the students
Mm-hmm.
had organized complaints where they had documented that the school was failing them. There was bias in the literature classes. They weren't being the accurate tests they needed to help them get placed in colleges and things like this. So as far back as then, and I know the schools in the South, those freedom schools had a slightly different focus,
Mhm.
but at the time there was a spirit in our community that we needed an education that was more conducive to making us stronger as a people, and that spoke directly to who we are. And as it pertains to the African-centered education movement, from the mid-'80s going up to around 2000, there was so much work done to implement African-centered curriculum in the Detroit public schools. And since the state has taken over, you have increasingly seen a decline
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of the implementation of African-centered curriculum infused in the existing curriculum. And this is important to note this, because there's a plethora, a wealth of evidence that shows that from the point of the African-centered curriculum being infused in Detroit public schools, it had a great impact
Correct.
on the success of the students that were in those schools. So,
Well, no, I mean, you really spoke to the crux of it. People got this misnomer about African-centered education as if, you're teaching hatred and all that. That has nothing to do with it. You speaking right to the soul of a child.
and you
But
had 4 children that's gone to African-centered schools.
Correct. 4.
Or have 4.
Have
They're all
4, right.
adults now, right?
All adults.
Why
and-
you look so young, man?
But you're speaking right to the spirit. And so when you talk about what happened in the 60s and what's happening now, since there's been a vacuum created in public education, first of all, in the public school, and let's not act like the public school system was the best thing.
Right,
So we're not saying that, but we know it needed support.
exactly.
And so what the freedom schools are providing is that extra support. So when we talk about African centered, we know the public education system don't speak to the African perspective or to the African American perspective, however you want to talk about it, because we know in a lot of the books it don't speak to us.
Exactly. You know, there's still books that teach us, and I try to unteach this in the classes I teach at the university level. Many of us were taught, and they still teach this today, that the history of African Americans began in 1619 when 20 Negro slaves, and that terminology is problematic right there. I can kind of live with the Negro. At the time, it was in vogue or whatever to refer to ourselves as Negroes. But the European, the people that enslaved our ancestors, they didn't go to Africa and get African slaves. They didn't go get Negro slaves. They went and got Africans and enslaved them. And if literature is saying they went to get African slaves, and or if we're teaching our children that they went to get African slaves or that our ancestors were African slaves, it has such a different meaning if you use more effective terminology and say our ancestors were enslaved Africans, because this puts the onus of the condition on the perpetrator of the crime, and it doesn't perpetuate the idea that we somehow signed up to be slaves and this was our identity. We have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. You're listening to Get Up, Stand Up with Minister Malik Shabazz. This is the Black in the Day and the 313. Could you tell us your name, please?
Sure, Sister Akila.
Sister Akila. And I'm glad you called, because my next question was going to be the board's involvement in this process. Welcome to the show, and of course, give us what you got.
Well, I want to say hello to the guests as well.
And this is Sister Akila Wanda Redmond, who is one of the key board members of the Detroit Board of Education in Exile.
That's
She's
right.
also running for election in the upcoming election in November. All
yes,
right.
you see. Yes, I just wanted to call in and thank you for this good conversation, and to thank Minister Malik for bringing such important and pertinent information to the audience. The Freedom School, I just want to get some clarity. Did you say, or are you saying, Kamal, that they are supplemental?
Yes, to provide extra support. Correct. And the reason I brought that up is that there's been some conversation that the intent of the Freedom Schools, or the Detroit Independent Freedom School, the intent behind it was for us to start our own charter school or public school, and that was never the intent.
So the intent is not to replace
Correct.
the existing schools. There's no design there to start an independent school separate from the school system or a charter school. It's to supplement the lack
Correct.
and the void that exists in the existing education that is being disseminated to our children in the Detroit public schools. Do you have a perspective on that,
I
Sister
do.
Akila?
I think that is something that is needed for our children. If we want to educate our children and bring them up to a standard where they can compete globally, because our children need extra. Or I wouldn't even say extra. We just need a level playing field,
Right.
which the Freedom Schools will provide that. And I think it would be an excellent idea for there to be some type of partnership and some real serious consideration in working together on a issue such as this.
So
Now, I am not under, as you know, there is an election in November, and much will depend on who is elected. So, so whoever wins, that will determine the course and the direction in which the district will go.
And
So I think it's excellent.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I would like to add that one of the benefits of the Freedom School is there's an agenda there that can be collaborative with the Detroit Public Schools, but it also is there regardless of who winds up being a Detroit school board members. I like what you said because if we have committed Africans like yourself, then we know that there will be much more of a collaboration with institutions and organizations like the Detroit Freedom School Movement and those members on the Detroit Board of Education. And I just like to back up a little bit. With the evolution of African-centered education in Detroit, there was a collaboration. There was the Community Task Force for Education, which included, and I hope I don't leave anybody out, Malik Yakini, Baba Mzee Nabawi, Baba Banachi, Baba Saeed, Mama Tahira, Sister Rakia. It was a group of community activists who had a relationship with people like Catherine Blackwell and Norman McCrae, who were involved in the social studies development in DPS, and they worked together to coordinate and work together to get African-centered education implemented into DPS. None of those people that I named were Detroit Board of Education employees or public school employees, but they were staunch advocates, activists that were committed to making the curriculum speak to the needs of our people.
And let me add, but also you notice we talk about the Detroit Independent School Movement. The whole focus is getting the community engaged, because when we look at what has happened over these last all these years, so many parents are just frustrated, don't know what to do, don't know how to do it, and those who know what to do is looking for support. So when we talk about the Detroit Independent School Movement, we're talking about bringing parents, different community groups together, and we do it on our own. They're independent of Detroit Public Schools,
Yes.
but they're the support, because I couldn't have said it better. Whether if the school get their stuff in order, we're there anyway. It's like what Mama said is I won't say even the playing field is giving our kids more of what they need.
Exactly.
But if it don't show up like it should, and that's the other part of this movement. Again, one aspect is to provide that supplemental support, but we got the other side of the sword. We still got to support the DPS board members in exile to get you all back in office, to get you back. And also, since our money is paying for this, for public education, we need it back, and we need it equitable. Because it's so many schools, from Davis Aerospace to the King, and so many, Oakman Orthopedic, that had their curriculum in order.
And I was in a meeting today with some people that I think that they were talking about this. What is this? They're trying to get community consent. What is this? It's something that the city council is trying to get passed. I wish I
Benefit agreement,
say that again.
community benefit agreement.
Yeah, that. I came into the meeting late, but what came up was that the Randolph, what do they call them? Vocation Center is what they used to call them. That there were only 40 students in the school. It also came up that Davis Aerospace, which was another Votech school, that these schools, what one person was saying, they're trying to get Randolph reopened and put out there in full force because we don't have any vocational school that is operating at full capacity to teach young people the skilled trades.
See, and let's slow down there. This is one prime example that was so criminal. You got Davis Aerospace that had its own school operating, that had license to teach kids aviation.
Yes, to
It was
repair
to repair.
and to fly.
You take it and put it inside of a Votech center, and it lost its license in that move. So,
And I've had the opportunity of, from time to time, I sub in DPS,
Mhm.
and I've been in both of those schools. And I went there. What I saw when I got there was nothing like what I expected to see.
correct.
in terms of what I had always thought these vocational schools or these type of schools were. But go ahead.
No, I mean you said it. So when they moved Davis Aerospace over to the Votech, of course they didn't have the room and the equipment, so they ended up losing their license to even teach.
And I wonder what happened to the equipment.
Well,
The equipment was there
So
previously.
the state of Michigan sold the children's aviation equipment.
They sold it or stole it or both.
SOLD.
SOLD.
There's so many atrocities that the state has committed against our children. But I want to say this because we do have to repair our children because there's a fight for control over the schools. There still is a fight. Not only are we in a fight with those who want to control the resources, we're in a fight for those who want to control our children's minds. It's very important that we elect the right people on the school board. And there is a movement out here to keep activists off the board. It's an active movement out here.
Mm-hmm.
The powers that be did not like the current school board, didn't want the current school board, and only left us in place because by law we have to be in place, but yet they usurp all of the power. And even now, unfortunately, if the state of Michigan, according to the documents that I have read, do not like who the people elect this November to serve on the board, it's quite possible that there will not be an elected board. But I'm being hopeful that the members who have served the community faithfully will be returned back to the board, because I do believe that now that all the money is gone, they stole all the money, so there's no more money to steal. And the teachers who remain are committed and dedicated teachers because they can go elsewhere with their skills. So with that, and with the right people on the board, with the right mindset, I believe that we can rise again to where our children, well, we know our children can succeed and achieve globally.
And Sister Akilah,
I just want to chime in on the conversation tonight. The freedom schools and what they offer is very important. And on your next show, Baba Kazinsa, maybe you could break down African-centered education, because folks are scared of it. When you mention it, they think you're talking about people running around with bones in their nose still and just Africa, without having an understanding of what African-centered education is. And that really, really needs to be broken down.
okay,
I believe, and explained
and
to the community,
and
to those who don't know
and
what African.
maybe I'll set a show up where we can do that.
One thing,
my
everybody, you two brothers.
There's something going on with the audio. Your voice
We'll
is
fight for a long time.
Sister Akilah. Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, your voice was kind of going in and out. But so some of what you said I missed. But what I'm going to do is work on putting together a show, a segment that, well, maybe I can have myself and some others come in and kind of lay out a whole thing on what African-centered education is and what it is not. But we kind of short on time. Could you tell us, for the listeners that want to support yourself and other board members like yourself, how can we, if I wanted to help with your campaign, is there contact information you have that you could maybe
Yes,
announce? Is
thank
there a
you,
phone
Baba
number,
Kazinsa.
website? Beg your pardon?
I said, yes, there is a contact number where I can be reached at.
Oh.
And that number is 313
313
646
646
3375.
3375. Tell us one more time.
313
313
646
646
3375.
3375. Did you want to make any comments before we go? We got about 2 minutes left.
This coming November 8th, vote for Wanda Redmond, also known as Sister Akila. And I do want to thank Minister Malik Shabazz for these opportunities that he gives us to get this information out, because it's so very important. And I want to thank you too, Baba Safin, for the guests that you bring before the listening audience.
You're welcome, and I'd like to thank Minister Malik Shabazz, and let's talk real soon about putting together, maybe we can do a forum right here in the studio.
Sounds great.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, okay, come on, we down on time, so give us more information.
give it
Freedom
real quick.
School every Saturday.
Every
9 to
Saturday
12.
at the African American Museum, 9:30 to 12.
My bad.
Every Saturday up until December the 17th. Please come out and join. If you have questions, you can contact us at 313-583-9395. Again, 313-583-9395.
And the email address, you can email us as well, is at capital letters, DIFS 313@gmail.com.
And also, we got teachers coming out to volunteer, but we also you can contribute in some form or fashion. We got
Okay.
people donating books that's just sitting in their house.
Right.
So just whatever you can contribute, come on out and contribute. Because again, we're calling this a movement, so we need everybody's support.
So is it okay if maybe people just kind of show up at the museum on Saturday? Not
Oh.
necessarily, I'm talking about like if maybe an elder or something wants to come to just see what's happening. Can
Please,
they just come?
that's what we would expect.
Okay.
You know, because we know nobody just go drop their child off, and
Right.
you want to see what's going on.
Well, I'm saying we might have some older people or
Oh.
somebody that's like, oh, well, I just want to go down here and check it out.
Come on
it's
out and check
kind
it
of
out.
an open door policy. You can come down, check us out, see what we're doing. It's the Detroit Independent Freedom School movement. We'll be having classes at the Charles Wright Museum, 9:30 to 12:30. Every Saturday leading up to December the 17th.
December the 17th.
We got African drumming, African dance, science, math, the STEM focus.
But also call, because it may be one opening up in your neighborhood. Again, the Shrine of the Black Madonna will be opening theirs up the second week of October, and there's a few other ones that's in the hopper right now. So please call to get that information.
So then this is truly a movement
Correct.
taking form.
Correct.
And this is actually African people in Detroit exercising our African agency in the form of Kuti Chagalia. Self-determination.
Yes,
in
sir.
essence, we're doing what Minister Malik Shabazz not only gave us the opportunity to do today and every other day, we're getting up and standing up and making it happen for ourselves, not waiting for anyone else's permission. We thank you for coming in.
Thank you
And
for
we'd
having
like
me.
to say you've been watching Black in the Day in the 313, and we urge you to join us and get up, stand up.